Welcome to this special edition of CN Live. I'm Joe Loria, the editor-in-chief of Consortium News. With me is my co-host, Elizabeth Voss. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was back at the White House again on Wednesday, imploring U.S. President Donald Trump to resume their war against Iran that last June failed to overthrow the government in Tehran. After their meeting, Trump says he's still hoping to get a deal with Iran to avoid renewed bloodshed. Trump wants Iran to give up all its nuclear enrichment and its ballistic missiles that can reach Israel. Iran has so far refused these demands. Netanyahu is intent on sabotaging any deal, according to our guest on CN Live, Ari Ben-Menashe, a former senior officer in Israel's Military Intelligence Directorate, or MID. One way Netanyahu can do that is to threaten Trump with release of embarrassing files from the Epstein tranche, which Israel possesses, Ben-Menashe says. He also speaks about Epstein's long career working as an intelligence agent for the MID under his handler, Ehud Barak. We're joined now by Ari Ben-Menashe from Montreal. Ari is a former senior official with the Military Intelligence Directorate of Israel, and Ari has some direct knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein, which the entire world is speaking about right now. And Ari, thank you for joining us again on Consortium News CN Live. Let me start with how you first found out about Jeffrey Epstein and what you learned about him, and then I'll take it from there, and then we'll hand over to Elizabeth for some more questions.
I first met him in Robert Maxwell's office in the 80s. He was a nice Jewish boy from New York visiting Mr. Maxwell, offering him all kinds of financial packages. And Mr. Maxwell actually liked him and wanted him to meet his daughter.
Elaine, of course.
Yes. And then he wanted to introduce him to the Israelis to get him a job. But I wasn't too thrilled with the idea because at the time we were working with Robert Maxwell. He was working for Israeli intelligence at the time. So Epstein looked like a very intelligent guy, but off his rockers, sort of a crazy young man, intelligent, but crazy young man. So I sort of kept away from him and said, no, we're not interested. But in the time being, Robert Maxwell went over our heads. He introduced him to the then director of military intelligence in Israel, Mr. Ehud Barak, who later became prime minister of Israel. And that's how Mr. Epstein started his career with the Israelis.
Was he working at Bear Stearns when you first met him in the office, when he said he came over to offer financial
I
packages?
don't remember. I don't remember.
Who introduced him to Maxwell? Do you have any idea about that? How did he wind up in his office?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
What happened is I met him in Maxwell's office, and he was trying to introduce a financial package to Robert Maxwell.
Did you speak to Barak about him and say, I don't think we should hire this guy?
No. I didn't even know at the time that he was introduced to Mr. Ehud Barak.
Yeah. I see. That was done without your knowledge. Now, at the time, it said that Maxwell was an asset for Mossad, not for the MID. Is that right?
No, he was working for Israeli intelligence. He was actually working with Barak. Military intelligence.
Okay, let me clear this up right now because you see, well, we're going to go into this a little more detail later because, but just Epstein, he did not work for Mossad, did he? Everyone is saying he worked for Mossad.
No,
there are documents that say that.
No, he did not work for Mossad. Neither did I. They keep on saying I worked for Mossad. No, he did not work for Mossad either. He was linked with military intelligence in Israel, and at the time, military intelligence was the senior agency running Israel's policies, military policies, and
Okay.
so
So
on.
what I think Elizabeth maybe follow up later on that question about why there's so much talk about him with Mossad. There's so many documents that mention him. He gives a wink. He tells Barack, "Don't tell him I work for Mossad," stuff like that. But let's leave that to aside for the minute. What work did Maxwell do for the MID? Do you know what
Who?
he was doing?
Yes, I was running him. He was receiving money from the Iranians through the Bahrainis for Israel because Israel was supplying the Iranians with arms at the time. This is in the 1980s. The Israelis and the Iranians were pretty close at the time. The Israelis tried to save the Iranians from Saddam Hussein by arming the Iranian military.
Right. So this is after the revolution in Iran. This is when Saddam attacked Iran at the behest of the United States, I believe, that they encouraged Saddam to attack Iran. And you're saying Israel parted with the United States then in the Iran-Iraq War. They supported Iran, whereas the U.S. supported Iraq. Is that
Well,
correct? In general?
The U.S. position wasn't very clear at the
Hmm.
time, and because it seemed that the U.S. was supporting both
Both
sides,
sides.
both sides. Go at it, guys. The
Yeah,
two
destroy each
sides.
other. We hate you both. Let's
Yeah, that's
destroy
right.
each other. And of course, you're talking about the Iran-Contra scandal, where
Well,
the
that
money
was
was,
part of it.
yes, that was part of
That
it.
was part of it.
Just for our
But
audience, the Iran-Contra scandal was in the 1980s. The Congress, U.S. Congress stopped the funding of the Nicaragua Contras because they'd killed some American nuns. And the Reagan White House went around illegally against the Constitution because it's up to the Congress to appropriate money, not the White House, to raise the money to actually continue to support the Contras. They sold weapons to Iran, the great Satan. And of course, Israel had a role in the funding of that. Didn't Jeffrey Epstein have a role in the Iran Contra scandal?
I did not see him have a role there. No.
Okay, but then
At
I
the
ask you,
time,
yes?
at the time, he seemed to still be thinking, trying to work his way through. He wasn't involved in Iran, at least when I was there, and he wasn't involved in Central America when I was there.
Okay. So let me ask you then the same question. What was he doing then for the MID?
He was working directly with Ehud Barak, and apparently they were targeting different leaders around the world, especially in the Middle East.
When you say targeting, do you mean trying to get blackmail material on these guys?
Blackmail material and so on. Yes.
And tell me about the relationship between Barack and Epstein, their personal relationship. They were quite close, weren't they? Well, we know that from the emails now, but what do we know about it?
They seemed to be quite close, and there's always rumors that Mr. Barak was gay, is gay. He's still alive, is gay, and apparently he fell in love with Epstein. Physically fell in love with him.
Okay. Okay. Was he already at that point? Did he have microphones, the cameras set up wherever he was living at that time? Was he already entrapping some of these Middle Eastern leaders
They said
at that time?
they started quite early. Yes, they started quite early.
Were there young women, underage women, or other women involved in those early?
I wasn't witness to any of that at that
Right.
point.
At that
I
point. Okay.
at that point uh, we really did not deal with him any longer.
When Barack became prime minister, what happened to this relationship? It continued, didn't it?
It continued, yes. And Mr. Epstein started doing bigger and bigger things by he recruited Andrew, the son of the Queen. I call him the son of the Queen. And Andrew was the very useful idiot that was inviting all kinds of important people to get, to party with them.
Why was Andrew such an important person to have under their control?
And because he was the son of the Queen, he could invite important people to the table.
To the table.
When I say to the table, sit down, come, we'll we'll have a we'll discuss, we'll propose to you financial issues, and then maybe we will have some girls for you, and then we can tape you and blackmail you.
Now, did Epstein work for, okay. Did Epstein work for the Military Intelligence Directorate until the end of his life, as far as you know?
Yeah, I believe so. Yes.
So even though Barack became prime minister and then former prime minister, he still had a relationship with the agency, whoever
Uh,
had taken over after Barack. He still,
Yeah.
no matter who the
Yeah.
prime minister was, even during Netanyahu's, some of his earlier years as prime minister, you believe Epstein still was
Yes,
working?
he was there. Yes.
Did
Once he belonged to Israel, he stayed as part of.
did he have a relationship with Netanyahu of any sort? What did Netanyahu think about him?
I don't know what he
You
thought
don't know
about that.
too? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to ask one more and then I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth. After you met Epstein in the office of Maxwell, did you see Epstein rather again after that initial meeting? Did you ever see him again anywhere?
Yes, yes, a few times in Maxwell's office.
Always in Maxwell's office.
Yeah, I did meet him outside Maxwell's
I
office.
see. Okay. Elizabeth, you have a bunch of
Sure.
questions.
Did you get the sense that Epstein was a bright individual? Because we've seen a video of him with Steve Bannon, and he seems not what I expected, I guess is the way I'll put it.
He seemed to be very bright, but very crazy.
Interesting. Crazy in what way?
Anything he wanted to do, he tried to do things that are not, we'll say, usual. He talked about, and while sitting down in Maxwell's office, he talked about girls, boys, having fun, parties, and everything else. Very unusual type.
Interesting. What do you remember anything he was saying about girls and boys and that
Not
type of thing?
really. It's just
Okay. What about his work with U.S. intelligence? Are you aware of any ties between him and the CIA or any other U.S. intelligence agency?
well, anybody working with the Israelis would have had ties with the Americans at that time and now too, and that's not unusual.
What have you made of the recent release of these Epstein documents? Have you had any time to look through them at all?
No, but what's not thoroughly, but from everything I heard, nothing surprised me. I mean, the guy set up quite a number of people around the world. And, one of the most interesting things was he set up the ruler of Djibouti.
Okay,
He
interesting.
set him up. And the guy that helped him set the ruler of Djibouti up was the head of DP World Dubai Ports, who was very close friends with Epstein. Um, and the way the relationship between UAE and Israel was created was through the friendship of these two men who shared an island in the Caribbean, who shared young boys and girls in the Caribbean, who did all that, head of DP World. And then because UAE got in a fight over the port in Djibouti, they together set up the ruler of Djibouti. There are pictures of the ruler of Djibouti with Epstein and so on and so forth. They set him up. And well, it has a knock on today with what's happening in the area.
Well, can you explain that? What do you mean they set him up? How did they set him? For what did they set him up?
He's seen with young girls and so on and so
I
forth.
see. Okay. And you said it has an effect today. How so?
Okay. Djibouti is together with Somalia have a problem in Somaliland and Israel. Israel is the only country that recognized Somaliland. They're putting troops there, and Somaliland and the UAE built a port in Somaliland, Berbera port, to compete with a port in Djibouti.
And Epstein had a role in that, or at least began this relationship with Israel and Somaliland as well.
Correct. He did.
Okay. Yeah, this just recently happened where Israel recognized Somaliland. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, but this relationship goes back about 10 years. And and
Isn't that where China has its only overseas base, one of two in Djibouti?
in Djibouti, yes.
Is that playing any role here, China, or it's irrelevant for
No,
China?
there's a French base there, there's an American base there, so it's
Okay, right.
not an issue. There's China, America, United States, and France, big presence in Djibouti. Yes.
Mhm.
And the problem was that DP World was building the biggest port in the Middle East, seaport in Djibouti, but they got in an funding argument with the president of Djibouti. So they moved on and built the port in Berbera, which is in Somaliland. So UAE split from Djibouti and the Saudis and Somalia and moved to Somaliland and Israel. Oh, and they built this port, which is also being used by the Ethiopians.
Let me go back again, if I can, to the origins. If you know, I asked you before we went on the air, I don't believe that you agree that Epstein, when he worked for Bear Stearns, had some role in the BCCI scandal, this enormous scandal in the 1980s, where
I
this
know the
back,
scandal was
yeah.
enormous, but I didn't know about his role. I really didn't know about
So you're
his
not
role.
saying he didn't
Yeah.
do it. You don't know about it, whether he did. This is
I don't know.
Mike Benz, a former State Department official who has a big following on social media now. He's saying that Epstein, when he worked for Bear Stearns, had a role in the BCCI scandal, and that's how he got
Possible,
cut. Yeah.
possible, possible.
Okay. All right.
I didn't say no. I just said I don't know.
I see. Now, do you know if Bill Barr, who was the Attorney General for George H.W. Bush and for Trump, his father was an OSS officer, and he got him Epstein his first job as a mathematics teacher in a high school, the Dalton School, it's called. Does that significant?
Not really. The most significant part was the meeting between Epstein and Robert Maxwell that started him off.
And he ultimately got him to get involved with his daughter, right?
Yes, 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 yes.
So what did she do? What was her role besides procuring all these young girls for him and his and the people he's setting
That
up?
was that was her role.
That was her role, nothing else.
Not much, no.
Well, it
But that
sounded like
was,
I think you've said before, Ari, that her job also was procuring people like Andrew, that she had more of those high class
Yeah,
connections. Yeah,
procuring
right.
people, so on. The girls, the boys, Andrew. Well, she knew Andrew. She got to know Andrew. Yes, she
but I
was
don't
very
get.
useful that way.
I mean, the things that shocks me is how involved this man Epstein was in almost everything that was going on. He was meeting plenty of heads of state constantly, in the West, in Asia, in Africa. Elizabeth, give us the
He was
rundown if you
pretty
can.
active. He was
Yeah,
pretty active, and he had lots of money to spread around. And the Israelis wouldn't pay it out of their own pockets, but they would get very rich Jews from the United States to pay for it, for his activity.
that also gave him deniability. He wasn't employed by the military directorate, intelligence directorate. He was given money by Wexler and other people. So the Israelis didn't
Yeah,
have any
that's
direct,
right.
no government money went to him. He could deny that he ever worked for intelligence, correct?
Well,
That's They
whatever.
laundered the money basically through these wealthy Americans, as you say.
Speaking of
Yeah.
Wexner, were you ever aware of him being directly involved with Israeli intelligence?
What do you mean? Of course.
Leslie, yeah. So
No, Wexler
can
you're
you
talking about.
Wexner? It's
Oh,
Wexner.
who?
Wexler.
Yes, yes, yes,
Leslie
yes,
Wexner. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Of
And can you
course.
tell us a little
They
bit about
would
that
talk to
for
him
our
about
audience who may not know?
funding. They would direct him on where to send money to, and so on and so forth. Of course, that wasn't even a question.
Thank you. Um, Another question. Are you aware that in the recently published Epstein files, there were two documents mentioning you that were removed very shortly after they were published?
Uh, Joe told me about them. No, I wasn't aware about of it, but Joe let me know yesterday about them. I read them. I read them. Yeah, I, I had something to do with Vanunu being brought back to Israel. Yes, I did.
Do you
But
think that
Did
why do you think they were removed, if you had to guess?
I, I have no idea. I even wrote about it in my book. Yes, that we had a role in bringing back Vanunu to Israel.
Yeah, and it seems because the issue is that it does seem like the information in those two documents, what was, as you mentioned, it was publicly known. These weren't kind of groundbreaking
Mm,
documents. So it seems like
No,
maybe
no.
they just wanted to remove any mention of you in connection with Epstein in order to, I guess, remove another obvious link with Israeli intelligence. I guess that's the only thing I can speculate that what may have caused that.
I don't know why,
Okay.
but I have no idea.
Another thing that comes up in the files is an email that Epstein sends to I forget who. I may have been a redacted recipient, but he basically is either telling someone about Maxwell working for Mossad and um, being killed, or he's summarizing what he's heard in the media. I'd like to just read that off to you really quickly. Yeah, it's to a redacted sender. The subject is he was passed away. He writes, Robert Maxwell threatened Mossad. He told them that unless they gave him 400 million pounds to save his crumbling empire, he would expose all he had done for them. In that time, he had free access to Margaret Thatcher's Downing Street, to Ronald Reagan's White House, to the Kremlin, and to the corridors of power throughout Europe. Maxwell passed on all the secrets he had learned to Mossad in Tel Aviv. In turn, they tolerated his excuses, vanities, and insatiable appetite for a luxurious lifestyle and women. He told his controllers who they should target and how they should do it. He appointed himself as Israel's unofficial ambassador to the Soviet bloc. Now, one thing to point out is that that has the least number of typos of anything I've ever seen Epstein send. So I assume that he's copy pasting this or something. So yeah, what do you make of that?
Well, I don't know what to make of the document, but Maxwell himself, yes, he was Israel's link with the Soviets at the time. Um, he even funded Gorbachev. You know, there was a coup against Gorbachev at the time. He funded him. He gave Israeli money without Israeli permission uh, to Gorbachev. Yes, he was involved with the Russians. The Israelis were involved with the Russians at that time. Yeah. But he was basically working for the Israelis, yes. But he was involved with the Russians,
Maxwell.
That's
Soviets.
Speaking of
that's
the
Maxwell
very
was.
Russians,
interesting.
I want
Yeah.
to just ask a moment, Elizabeth. There seems to be a concerted effort to bury what we're talking about right here, which are the uh, very obvious evidence that we knew before, because we've spoken to you before, and what's come out in these documents, that Epstein was an asset for Israeli intelligence and American, as you said. There seems to be an effort to bury that. One way is to try to explain, and it's been in the British papers, in the Mirror, which is Maxwell's old paper, and in the Daily Telegraph and the Sun, I believe, that they finally admitting that yes, he was a spy and he did collect compromise. That's something the Western press kept denying. Now they admit it, but they say he was doing it for Russia, not for Israel. What do you think about that?
He was doing it for North Korea. He's doing it for China. He was doing it for, like, please. It was connected to the Israelis, and that was his role.
So they're doing that. You think you see a complete effort on the part of the Department of Justice to cover up his connection to Israeli
I
intelligence.
don't know who's trying to cover up what, but Epstein was working for the Israelis, period.
Right. So we get these BS stories in the New York Times this week said that he tried to get meetings with Putin and with Lavrov, and he didn't.
Sure, I'm
He
sure he
didn't.
did. But I'm saying I'm sure he tried.
Yeah, but he
So
didn't.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure,
And then
sure.
he spoke to
Why
Vitaly
not?
Churkin, who was the ambassador at the UN in New York, who I knew when I covered
No
him there. And
problem. No
that was
problem.
only to help his son get a job on Wall Street, an internship. I mean,
No, it
they
doesn't
cannot
matter.
pin him
If
down.
even working for the Israelis, why wouldn't he want to speak to Putin? Why wouldn't he want to speak to Lavrov? Working for the Israelis.
Well, it looks like Putin and Lavrov were smart to stay away from this guy because a lot of people are in trouble now for even having met with him and having a photograph.
That's right. That's right. They seem to be smart enough not to talk to him.
They saw what poison, how toxic he probably was, right? They were able to understand that. So there is 3 million pages that's still not been published. Is that right, Elizabeth?
Yeah, around 3 million pages. Yeah.
Do you ever think you will see that, Ari? These pages, the rest of the documents?
Well, it depends how much Netanyahu wants to set up Trump. The documents might come from Israel and not from the Justice Department.
Uh, oh, you've opened up a whole very fascinating line of inquiry right now. As we know, Netanyahu is in Washington this week trying to get Trump to resume
Trump,
the war, right?
sorry, Trump always wanted to do a peace deal with the Iranians. It goes back to his first term in office. He said privately, but I was aware of it, that he will make a deal with the Iranians soon after the election. This is in 2020, except he did not get reelected. Now he's back and he does want to do a deal with the Iranians. And I say, fine. If he does this deal with the Iranians, no matter what his reasonings are, I will nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't care why he wants to do it, but he should do it. Yes, and he's the only one that can do it because he's crazy enough to.
What you're suggesting here is that the Israelis have the same documents the Department of Justice have, maybe even more, and that
Correct.
they could use that. They're turning the tables now. Epstein was collecting this stuff to blackmail people, and now the Israelis could use it to, in a way, blackmail Donald Trump, or threaten to reveal what he.
Donald Trump or other American politicians. And now we're talking about Lutnick. We're going up the ladder slowly. Yes. We and the Americans, on the other hand, were able to transfer all the Epstein nonsense on the Brits, but I think it's going to come back to them.
So Netanyahu flies to Washington. He's been like 10 times, it seems, in the last 12 months.
Se
He doesn't want to
seven
talk over
times.
the phone, obviously, any phone. So any secure phone. He's there and he will tell Trump, we know about this and we know about that, and we have
I
the
don't know
documents
what
to
he's
prove it.
going to tell him, but he's going to tell him, uh, kill the Iranians.
He's going to
I don't know
sabotage this
why.
peace deal.
What did they do? Can you tell me what the Iranians did recently?
Absolutely not. They are a victim of aggression, and they were last June. I don't think there's any doubt about that. This is not to support everything that the Iranian government does, but this is pure
No,
aggression.
you don't. Nobody supports what they do, but a peace deal with them would work out, and eventually the regime will straighten itself out. And the way to handle this is to exchange, not to start bargaining with them because Iranians bargain people to death. You just exchange embassies, remove sanctions, and tell the Iranians behave. If you don't behave, we'll come back at you. When you tell them behave, they know what behavior to behave means.
So you have any doubts that the U.S. and Israel are actively working to overthrow the government there, and that what we saw in the last month, this uprising was fueled by the U.S. Treasury. The Secretary of the Treasury has admitted that they hurt the currency. They were able to sink the Iranian currency.
Yeah,
Pompeo has
correct.
said Mossad is on the streets with you. I mean, there's no doubts that they're trying to overthrow the government. And what I'm asking you is, you think that Netanyahu could use the threat of revealing to the press some of the worst things that Trump may be in the Epstein files for, that's now been redacted, threatening to release that if he doesn't go ahead with resuming the war against Iran?
I am sure Netanyahu will try to sabotage any American peace deal in different ways because it's in the interest of not of Israel, but of his cabinet and the people around him to stay in power. It's not in the interest of Israel. Netanyahu, in the last 3, 4 years, did the horrible service to Israel. Now Israel is a pariah, is a genocidal state, all that. Before that, Israel was doing okay.
Elizabeth, do you have any further questions?
Sure. I was going to ask you about a couple of documents that we saw in this recent release that were two different FBI informants telling them that Epstein worked for Mossad. We've already addressed the fact that as far as your experience goes, he did not work for Mossad. He was working for Israeli military intelligence. But both of these informants claim that he was working for Mossad, and uh, they both give publicly available information. One of them, the informant, has been identified as Charles Johnson, who was working with Alan Dershowitz around the time that Epstein got his sweetheart plea deal. And Johnson claimed in this document with the FBI that he heard Alan Dershowitz tell Acosta that Epstein belonged to intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. In the other document, we have it's labeled secret and no foreign, and it basically has a separate informant go through and give some very publicly available information that all of us already knew. But then it has two giant sections that are redacted and labeled secret and no foreign. The synopsis is also labeled that way. I just wanted your take on those and yeah, what you think might have been so significant that they
Sure.
had to
First of
redact
all,
it.
people tend to mix up Mossad and military intelligence. They are both intelligence. They are both intelligence agencies of Israel. So that's the first thing. So I think, yeah, what he's saying is pretty well known. Yeah, sure.
Do you think Dershowitz also, to your knowledge, was Dershowitz also working with Israeli intelligence?
Dershowitz worked as a lawyer for several Israeli agencies
Great.
and high and senior Israeli officials. Yes,
Yeah, because
that's
Johnson
how we
in
made the living.
yeah, Johnson does also claim that when he was working with Dershowitz, that after phone calls with Epstein, that Dershowitz would then be called by Mossad, and Johnson would be there taking notes, and Mossad would be briefing or debriefing with Dershowitz, according to him. So
Possible.
possible. Uh, Journalist Whitney Webb argues that basically nowadays the Epstein scandal, the Epstein blackmail ring is basically obsolete because of the rise of AI and surveillance technology. And you see that with companies like Peter Thiel's Palantir. Can you comment a little bit about that? I mean, obviously, we have in previous decades, we had Robert Maxwell involved with the bomb scandal.
Clearly, that
Go ahead.
technology is much. I think sure, they don't need human intervention. They have all kinds of technology and so on and so forth. Yeah, sure. We moved on, mo- moved on. Maxwell at the time, Robert Maxwell at the time, was peddling Promise software at the time. Now, Promise software is just completely obsolete. Yes, we've gone way beyond that. So, yeah, sure. She's right.
Yeah. Yeah, which is scary because her point is that you don't need an Epstein. And it's not even just that Promise is obsolete, but you don't need an Epstein anymore because you're simply able to
Well, you
hack
might
into
need an
somebody's computer or
Epstein
whatever.
because
And
you need a human touch if you want to blackmail somebody with young girls and so on. You still need a human touch.
okay. Uh, Ghislaine says she knows 25 men and four co-conspirators who made secret deals. Can you speak to that a little bit?
with the U.S. government.
With the US government, yes, to basically not be prosecuted.
Possible, very possible.
Do you think
And
Trump will give her any type of clemency?
sorry.
Do you think
Um,
Trump will give her clemency and will get her out of prison?
it would be very hard for him to give her a pardon or clemency right now because of all the publicity around this. It will be. Then he might do it in his last day in office or something of that nature. But now it would be very hard for him to do.
Now, and you may not have direct knowledge of this, but is it your feeling that Trump himself is implicated in wrongdoing with
I
underage
have no
girls?
idea. I have no idea.
Yeah. Okay.
I think Netanyahu has an idea, maybe.
Yeah.
He probably does. Yes.
And what about, and obviously this may be very far outside of your wheelhouse and experience, but we saw in the files that emails and documents that corroborated earlier reporting that Epstein was obsessed with basically some really bizarre stuff in terms of like having lots of children, gene editing, some very odd transhumanist type interests. Have you ever been aware of any of that? What do you think he was trying to do with all of that?
Just a crazy guy that was trying to experiment in all kinds of things. Yeah. I told you when I first met him, the first feeling I got, yeah, he's pretty intelligent, but he was crazy out there.
So you think that that interest was separate to his work with Israeli intelligence?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, what does this whole mess tell you about the people who rule the Western countries and other countries? People in ruling circles, how they behave. What does this tell you about these kinds of people that surrounded Epstein?
Some of these people are what they are. Not all of them, everybody's like that, but thing. And one of the worst Epstein episodes would be the meeting between Bill Clinton, Ehud Barak, and Arafat. The Israelis and the Palestinians were about to get a deal done, but between Clinton and Ehud Barak, the Israeli deep state told them, no, you can't do it because if you do it, we're going to go after you. And they did actually go after Clinton. And Barak did have to step down as well after a while. And Clinton, they brought Monica upon us.
You say Monica Lewinsky was an Israeli operation?
Uh, of course, it was. Of course, it was.
Or were you working still for the MID at that time?
No, but I still had my connections.
Mm-hmm. And Epstein had nothing to do with that one, Epstein, correct?
Sorry?
Epstein had nothing to do with that one.
We don't know that.
Well, he did go visit the Clinton White House at least, over 15 times, right?
Yeah.
17 times.
Okay, I know. Yeah. And Monica Lewinsky destroyed the chances of peace in the Middle East. And this is what people are not talking about. This is important to understand. Clinton was about to do a peace deal with the Palestinians and with Barak there, but thing. Now, Monica Lewinsky also destroyed a chance to do a deal with the Iranians at the time. President Khatami of Iran at the time flew to Mirabel Airport in north of Montreal, and from there was to fly to New York to be at the UN. In Mirabel Airport, President Clinton met President Khatami, and they were talking about a peace deal. That's why the Israelis put the main reason why the Israelis put Monica Lewinsky on Clinton's back. And they put also Epstein on Clinton's back. And if you remember, the US Secretary of State, she was talking about a peace deal with Iran publicly. If you remember that.
Madeleine Albright.
Madeleine Albright. She was talking about it publicly. And Clinton actually met President Khatami in Mirabel Airport in Canada, north of Montreal. And Khatami's excuse for being there was he's flying to the UN in New York and his plane cannot be parked in the United States. And they were very close to a peace deal between the Iranians and the Americans. under Clinton. But of course, the Israelis sabotaged it. And of course, Clinton being Clinton and loving doing whatever he does sexually and whatever, got himself into trouble. This is the worst type of situation. See, it wasn't, again, it wasn't that the Israelis went only after Republicans or Democrats. They went after American politicians. And Clinton had the opportunity to do a peace deal with the Palestinians, and he had the opportunity to do a peace deal with the Iranians. But he was sabotaged. And that is the worst thing the Israelis ever did to the Americans or to themselves. There'd been nothing wrong with a Palestinian deal. There would have been nothing wrong with a deal with the Iranians. If you remember that episode, that would be the most important issue I would put out there. I don't care if Trump feels that this is his vindication or not, but this is real, this is true. And this should be put out there to understand these two opportunities existed under Clinton, the Clinton administration.
And you're saying they're trying to do the same thing, to sabotage again a possible Trump.
They're trying to sabotage again. Yes, they're trying to sabotage again. But I say with Trump, it's more difficult because some of it is water on his back. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is, okay, I screwed around, so what?
Well, how
This
about
is
with a
Trump.
14-year-old girl or a 12-year-old girl that he
Well,
supposedly
he
threatened
won't
to
say that. He won't say
disappear?
that. We don't know that. But all I'm trying to say is that it would be more difficult with Trump than what they did to Clinton. And Clinton should, if he appears in front of Congress, should talk about this. But if he doesn't, you have a responsibility to remind him of his meeting with President Khatami and his meeting with Ehud Barak and Arafat. You have a responsibility, you journalists have a responsibility of reminding Clinton of all this.
Of
I
course,
know.
this has never come out, his meeting in Montreal, right? He flew there in an
Well, now
unmarked
you
plane,
can
right? Yeah,
you can find out about it. It's not in Montreal proper, it's in Mirabel
right.
Airport, north of Montreal.
So he flew in on an unmarked plane and then back to Washington,
Not to Washington, to New York, to the
to New
UN.
York, okay, where they were both
This is
going.
Khatami.
Right.
Clinton flew from Washington to Mirabel.
Now, let me ask you this about just a small point on Lewinsky. Did she know the role she was playing, or was she put up to
I
it
have
without
no
knowledge?
idea.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
but they knew his weakness, obviously, and they were able to exploit
Clearly,
that.
they knew his
Yeah,
weakness.
yeah. And Trump, you're saying it's a different time as well. It's 30 years later. The times are different. The morality is different today. So, but if he's revealed to have been with a 12-year-old girl and threatened to disappear her like another one, which is an allegation and a lawsuit, this is not Monica Lewinsky. This is much worse than that. I mean, that could destroy him. That, if that's true, and if the Israelis can prove
I
that.
have no idea. I have no idea. But in the time being, I think the Israelis will do anything they can to sabotage Trump.
But a couple of weeks ago, it looked like Trump was on the verge of restarting the war against Iran, and this time for a regime change. And it stopped. And the stories indicated that Israel had not been able to replenish their interceptor missiles to defend against ballistic missiles and drones of Iran. And the Wall Street Journal had reported in June of last year that Israel had asked for the war to end. They asked Trump to end this war because they ran out. They were running out. The U.S. used 25% of their own THAAD missiles. So the U.S. stocks were going down. Why would Israel want to start a war right now? Are they able to withstand the onslaught that Iran is threatening?
Well, they need some enemies in order for Netanyahu and company to stay in power. You start a little war there. And they don't care. They really don't care. And I keep on saying Israel is a small country. One nuclear bomb from Pakistan will do them in. Uh, but but they don't seem to care.
Under what circumstances would Israel use its nuclear weapon?
If Netanyahu feels threatened, he'll use it.
You mean his own political life?
Yeah, his own political career, if he thinks he'd probably use it.
So you're saying he and the others around him in this very extreme cabinet he has, they don't care about the Israeli people or society.
No,
They're
they care
crazed.
about a thing, and they think, I don't know what God promised them, what they're looking for. I mean, there's an Israeli state. You can make peace with everybody around you and live happily ever after. You can even make peace with the people in Gaza. You know, Trump keeps on talking about the Gaza deal. Where is the Gaza deal? We keep on seeing Israelis killing Palestinians in Gaza. Where is the Gaza deal? I mean, what's this all about?
Well, it's an abomination where he has supported the ethnic cleansing of this place in order to build this sick fantasy of a Mediterranean resort on top of the
Okay.
bones of tens of thousands of people.
Let them build anything they want. Just do the peace deal. Let the Palestinians build whatever they want. Give them money. The Saudis are willing to finance it. Sure. And then if you want to own the nicest hotel in Gaza, let Jared Kushner own it. So what? But get it done. Make peace.
You think it's going nowhere then, and then no countries are going
No,
to,
it's not going nowhere because the Israelis are blocking it. It's going nowhere.
and they will resume the war against the attacks on Gaza.
They are attacking the
No,
Palestinians
but
every
I
day.
mean the way it was before, with the supposed idea of defeating Hamas, but I don't think they want to defeat Hamas because the aim is to depopulate the country and take it over completely. And if you defeated Hamas, the war would have to end. So, will they start again the genocidal on a larger scale? I agree, it's still going on, the genocide, but on
It's still
a
going
larger scale.
on. They might raise the ante and go on. It's this is the thing, and I don't really understand what this Israeli cabinet wants or needs. You have a country. You could make a peace deal. You can work it out with the West Bank too, with the Palestinians in the West Bank. They did. You don't need the Palestinian Authority, by the way. I think they're more corrupt than the Israelis are.
Hated by
Okay,
the Palestinians. Hated by them.
that's correct. But they can work out the deal in the West Bank. They can work out the deal in Gaza and live happily ever after and make lots of money. I believe in a good economy. They make lots of money and, you know, turn it into another Singapore. They could do that. Banking, they have the know-how to do it. Yeah, whatever. Tourism, banking, whatever you want to do there. You can do that. And it won't take much. But I don't know. They don't want this group of people believe in something that I don't know what they believe in.
Well, isn't it just Ben Gurion's dream of a greater Israel that they were already he was working towards and in slow
How
motion?
great. Okay, what do they want? Do they want to take Syria or Lebanon, or what do they want to do? Greater
Well,
Israel.
at least have governments there that they can control through indirect proxy regimes to have a regional empire, basically, a regional hegemony.
For what?
For the
For
aggrandizement,
what?
for their idea of
For
being a
what?
great power, being a the megalomania. This is
Uh,
what drives empire. What drives the
well,
American
well,
empire?
I'm all for a different idea. The idea should be peace, prosperity, make lots of money, make and live happily ever after.
That's not satisfactory to me. Now, the Israeli government just changed some laws about property ownership in the on the West Bank. You
I
may have seen
know,
that.
I know. I've been following it. Yeah,
That's
sure, sure. We can't have Palestinians owning all this land. You're kidding? They're Palestinians. They're terrorists.
so. It looks like they were really moving forward as Gaza is a little bit uh, on the back burner. They're going ahead with the West Bank. This is to try to get control of all of
Yeah,
historic Palestine. And the Trump administration and the Germans and the Australians and Britain, they're all supporting. They have supported it. Does this shock you?
they don't
Did,
know what to do. They have no idea what to do. Yes? What can you do other than trying trying to stop supplying the Israelis with guns and money and so on and so
that's
forth,
it.
sanctioning them? But
Yep.
there's a big but Israel has its network of people around the world, and they can't really do it.
They can't. You mean talking about like the lobbies in the United States and in European countries and even in
Correct.
Australia here. They
In
will destroy the
Australia, too.
political careers. They will destroy the political.
That's correct. It's going to take time. And by the way, speaking about Australia, uh, Netanyahu visited Australia in the 90s a number of times. You know that.
No, I didn't.
And
Hmm.
yes, he did. And also uh, now they're trying to keep Australia on side by sending Mr. Herzog over, but it didn't work out too well, I suppose. Okay.
Yeah, I was in the middle of that violence the other
Uh,
day. I filmed the thing, and I had
okay.
horses charging at me and police pushing. It got ugly, and I gave a black eye to Australia. So you think this is pretty bad PR for Herzog, isn't it?
Yeah. And by the way, Herzog, on the other hand, is is not as extreme. Is not an extremist like the Netanyahu cabinet.
Right.
Herzog, Herzog, if it was up to him, he would have done a deal in Gaza, and he might have not let Hamas attack Israel on October 7th. He might have done a deal with them before that happened.
Are you saying that Netanyahu allowed Hamas to attack Israel on October 7th?
Of course they did.
Did they knew about it in advance, the Israelis?
You know, there's one story I would like to share. The Shah of Iran, living in Virginia, that's the son of the late
Yeah.
Shah, publicly flew to Israel in 2023, and there were pictures of him sitting down with Netanyahu, telling him out of his sources in Iran, he found out that Hamas is about to attack Israel on this day, at this time, and so on and so forth. So this is one source that told Netanyahu exactly what's going to happen. I'm sure he had other sources as well.
What is a possibility that there were Israeli informants inside to help organize this?
Possible, everything's possible. Okay, thank you for this.
They let it happen so they could move forward on Gaza the way they have. Is that what your
Yeah,
theory
that's
is?
right.
Well, Ari, thank you very much for the time you gave us. It's been exactly 1 hour, and we went over a lot of things. And I think you've really illuminated the role Epstein played, and with your last words here about what Israel's doing in the current situation. So we
I
thank you.
would, if I were you, I would highlight the Clinton issues to the world.
I will
Bring
make an
them
attempt to reach his spokesperson and put a question to him about that. I've without a lot of hope that they'll answer it, but we'll try. And then without
because
yes.
because this is key to what's happening right now. I know it works in his mind, it works in Trump's favor, but it's the truth.
Thank you, Ari Ben Menashe, for joining us today on CN Live.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.